We're live.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We took a quick break. House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It is the 24th of February, and we're going to talk about our data center bill, H727, with Director Port from the Department of Public Service. I'm Kathleen James from Manchester.
Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury.
Richard Bailey, Memorial 2.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington.
Michael Southwood, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4. Graham Kleppner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Laura Spillian, Wyndham 2.
Maria Royal with Legislative Council.
Jared Carpenter, Lake Champlain Committee.
Dana Lee Pipe, New Cross Neighborhood.
Great. Rep. Torrey is here.
Dara Torrey, Washington.
Okay. Sorry. All right. For the record.
TJ Poor, Director of Regulated Utility Planning, Public Service Department. And thank you for the opportunity to testify again on H727 and the opportunity to provide some edits to the original bill. And I'll just start. The primary intent of our edits are really to ensure that the rate regulation and electric generation siting remain with the PUC and under their jurisdiction, while land use siting remains under the jurisdiction of the Land Use Review Board. That's the primary scope of our edits. It also incorporates a number of things we talked about the last time I was here on this bill in terms of trying to set the appropriate guardrails for ensuring protections for ratepayers in view of a tariff for a large load customer, while encouraging load that could be beneficial for all ratepayers and for Vermont. So we're trying to strike that balance here, and I will walk through the changes if there's no other questions on it.
Could you just say again, because that was helpful to me, that the overall intent of your suggestions is to ensure that what remains with the
rate regulation, so electric utility rates, rate regulation, and electric generation siting. So if there's a generator, then those Section 248 pieces remain with the PUC, while land use siting and provisions that the Land Use Review Board are really expert in remain with the Land Use Review Board.
and so the electric generation siting would only come into play if we're doing a bring your own power thing. Am I understanding everything?
Generation, if there is a export, if a data center were to come to Vermont and have a generator that at any point can export to the grid, then that 248 is implicated.
So bring your own on its own does not implicate 248. It's if it can export.
That's my understanding, yes. Yeah.
Currently, we don't have bring required.
Correct.
So it's only if they either require bring your own power or they do bring their own power, and they generate more power than they're consuming and it goes to the grid.
Right.
That's what you're talking about. So we're talking about
when
the
I
rate
say electric
regulation.
generation siting, yes, yeah.
That seems totally clear to me. But then this electric generation siting part of it could be not relevant or relevant.
Yeah, and I think as we go through there, we'll see how even electric generation could be implicated in a large load tariff, even if it was never going to export to the grid. And in terms of economic benefit and not causing harm to ratepayers as it relates to resource adequacy or market price pressures. Bring your own generation could be a solution to those problems or to those issues and opportunities, and some may say so it could be a solution in that then it would be incorporated into the tariff review. And I'll point that out as we go through.
Okay.
the language. And I'll also, you can also share my screen here so that. Let's see. Um, Okay, so there are a couple of other smaller wording changes here on page 1, line 8 here. We added the word resiliency. But that could be resilience with just an E at the end instead of a Y. But just a acknowledgement that resilience of the grid is elevated. It's part of the comprehensive energy plan as we talk about grid evolution, and it's elevated all of our discussions now. And so I want to recognize it here, and that you'll see that as a common theme when we propose changes these days. So
Okay.
um,
I have a question, Director, before you go on.
Sure.
I think it would be beneficial, unless Rep. Sibilia thinks this is premature, but it doesn't feel premature to me as the clock ticks. As we're going through these suggestions from DPS, this is really the time for committee members to understand the changes they're suggesting, ask questions, raise a flag if a section is really problematic for you. Okay, because I don't anticipate we're going to have another comprehensive walkthrough with DPS like this. So I just want to flag this for everybody that this conversation is important. And I'm definitely going to be asking questions and saying like, I don't like that, I like that. Okay, so I don't think there's going to be a round 2 of this with DPS. Okay, great.
In that same paragraph on page 1, we added the potential language around the potential opportunity that there could be benefits from large electric loads locating in Vermont. So acknowledging the regulation of data centers, but also acknowledging the potential benefits.
And that's just, sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
and that's just leaving it vague because you don't know what those benefits could end up being.
Right. Okay. I mean, there are things like, you know, conceptually, you could imagine things like they're contributing to the fixed cost of the system without creating additional new costs that other ratepayers pay. And so in that sense, it has downward rate pressure for all other ratepayers, and that could be a benefit. More broadly, there's you know, economic benefits that you know, a common section 248 criteria is economic benefit to the state, and you know, in that things like property taxes and jobs get counted. I'm not saying that those will happen with data centers, but just like those are the types of things that would be kind of considered under a potential benefit. Thank you.
Maybe it should say potential benefit.
Hmm.
They're undetermined.
I-
I'm just talking about Maria in committee. Okay.
I was tempted to actually just write it in there and
Oh,
I have, but
I mean-
I won't.
Whatever you want.
I'm gonna not do
That's
that.
okay.
Here, if that's all right.
Sure.
If it's helpful, I could do it and say,
No,
go, but.
I think this will be good,
Okay,
probably from you guys, and then we'll take it from there.
okay, that's,
Yeah,
yeah.
TJ moonlighting and drafting ops over there.
I know.
Higher, sorry, about this.
I know. Okay.
Okay, going on to page 2, in the first paragraph there on line 2, I removed the word essential. I don't think of data centers in the same way as like hospitals or other things. So let's remove that.
Should we say emerging? Or I don't really, I can't believe I just said that, but I'm looking at the sentence and I'm wondering, like, is it necessary if we pull out essential? Like, I think emerging would work. Otherwise, it's of an industry. I mean, it's, or we could say of large load industry, large load entities. Sorry.
On the top, I mean, emerging sounds
Emerging.
good for now, but if this lasts for
Emerging.
10 years, then it might not be an emerging industry anymore. But,
Just be an industry.
right. So, but I wouldn't object to emerging.
Great.
And then, we added the word economic in line 4. We're talking about a regulatory framework, and what that regulatory framework promotes, and added economic as an outcome received equal to other outcomes in the list.
Can I just really quickly?
Mhm.
So this red line incorporates the PUC.
Yes,
That's,
yes.
okay.
Yeah. The PC saw a drop to this red line before we sent it to you.
But it includes the changes that they suggested to us. Okay.
One thing for the committee to discuss might be if, when we have a list like this, if all the criteria are meant to be weighed equally, it's easy for me to foresee a situation in which climate and environmental outcomes would be at odds with economic outcomes. So I'm concerned about that. So I will just flag that for discussion.
I will note that those kind of trade-offs and conflicting priorities are, well, as you know, they're all over statute, right? And in our energy policy in particular is the one that I have kind of stamped on the back of my head, or back of my eyelids, I guess, so I can see it. And that has things like affordability and environmental sustainability, greenhouse gas emissions, economic vitality, and it has those trade-offs in the same way. So I don't know. I guess not unusual, I guess is my point, but
And I would argue that it's all the same anyway, actually, because environmental sustainability is economic.
But it doesn't seem to get considered in that way.
Well,
So
yes.
unfortunately, it feels like
There's a
that is not the framework.
there's a time frame difference.
Yeah.
It's kind
Right, like long-term
Yeah.
economic versus short-term economic.
All right. Well, we can discuss that.
I will
Fine.
actually probably, if I'm still coming back tomorrow afternoon, if you still are having me, when I talk about the energy plan, that's one of the things that's in the energy plan is talking about the different ways to look at things from a societal basis or different frameworks, whether you draw the borders of the analysis around Vermont or around ratepayers, similar to how I talked about in kind of a net metering discussion, ratepayer versus societal. It's kind of those different frameworks and how we think about that. It all applies here as well. Okay, the bottom of page 2, this section covers the tariffs and contracts with the data center. And as I testified last time that any data center in Vermont would need to be served by a retail electric utility. So this section requires any data center over 20 megawatts to enter into we termed here a large load service equity contract. These types of contracts aren't unusual in regulated utility service. We talked about earlier, like a snowmaking Terra. Global Foundries, before they became a self-managed utility, was on a contract of this type. So they do happen, and there are guidelines that the commission follows approving the tariffs. These and really one of the main principles there is cost causer pays for upgrades associated or cost to the system caused by the end user, and the commission's one of the commission's roles is to ensure that the rest of customer classes are not harmed by this contract.
So I have
Go ahead.
a quick question on that. Is large load service equity contract, is that a thing? Is that something that
That was my question.
that the PDC does, or is it is it establishing a thing?
So this is establishing a thing. So
Okay.
there's
Oh,
it's established. Sorry, it's naming a thing for data centers to be called a large load
Yeah.
service equity contract.
Okay.
In the past, these have been called a number of things, but special contract is a term of art that has been used. And I think most of the snowmaking ones or the Global Founders one at least at one point in its history was called a special contract.
Okay. Anyway, it's sort of creating a discrete category of tariff, I guess.
Right. And this one of the reasons I think to do that is, Green Mountain Power right now has a large load tariff on the books, and that it's basically the one that Global Foundries use, but it's still on the books. And so, if a customer interconnected at the transmission level and met the requirements over 10 megawatts, then they may have the option to actually use that Green Mountain Power tariff if, it was to their liking. And just, this would actually say, you can't actually even use that tariff that's on the books. It's got to be this specific contract that meets the requirements that we lay out under this provision.
Sure, somebody want.
70, I think. Maybe, 70. I think it's 70.
So, so these two paragraphs that you suggest striking are language that the as introduced draft was using to try to say, this is what this is going to look like. I'm looking at Marina. And it's striking out our kind of description of what we think it is and just calling it a large load service equity contract, which is a new name for something similar that you've done with ski areas before.
May I?
Yeah.
So, and I think, so this is part of the PUCs. The PUC had, I think our original bill required us to develop tariffs for each utility area, perhaps.
I can't remember where we landed. I actually thought it was the PUC having a general tariff applicable
Okay.
to all data centers, and then each utility has their own contract
Yes.
with specific provisions. So I think,
How
correct
is
me if I'm wrong,
how's this different from that?
now it is basically just combining just a general tariff with specific contractual provisions. So it's almost combining the two.
And would it not vary by utility then?
Well, these are the minimum requirements.
It likely would vary by utility. So that I think the original language, as I understood it, as Royal said, had the commission developing a general tariff, and then each utility under that would then propose their version of it.
Mhm.
And then the commission would actually, I think later on, have to do a rulemaking as well. This actually just takes out the step of the general tariff, what we proposed and in alignment with the commission, and just has the utilities proposing the tariffs to the commission for approval. And so there could be 17 different ones of these, but it's just if you or 16, let's say Global Foundries probably would not have one, but the commission could have to approve 16 different of these tariffs, but that would be appropriate because all the ratepayers are different in the costs. The cost structures of each utility are different and the embedded costs are different.
Greg Morrow?
So is there a definition somewhere of what would be included in the large load service equity contract?
Yes, so right underneath, so starting on line 7 of page 3, it starts to get into, so just above that is what is deleted, what we just talked about, that kind of general language with deleted and replaced, and it says the large load service equity contract shall, and then we get into a number of of requirements, which the next couple of pages address. Some of which were in the original draft and some are either clarified or added here. Oops, too far. Okay, so at first and yeah, including on line 9 there, it starts with the original language that includes a method of allocating costs that's equal or proportionate to the cost of providing electric service to the data center. So it's like a cost causer pays. If they're causing costs, then they need to pay. And then including what we added here to the original language was the just to be clear, is the embedded cost. Equitable contributions to the embedded cost of the system. So they have poles and wires now that ratepayers have already paid for. Now the data center is going to use some of them. They should chip in.
Mm-hmm.
The next provision on line 15 of that page, we took out the word solely. So it was, the whole provision says that the contract shall mitigate the risk of other ratepayer classes paying unwarranted costs, and including generation and infrastructure costs incurred solely to meet the load requirements of a data center. There could be other costs that were incurred by the utility that are not just to meet the specific direct load requirements of the data center. So that's why we took out the word solely.
So that serves to expand the coverage of costs, not.
Correct. Yep. And then we added some language in lines 16 and 17 there to even further give some shape to that in terms of energy capacity, transmission or resource adequacy costs incurred as a result of the addition of the data center's load. This is like things like the data center uses more energy, so market clearing prices are higher for everybody else because they use more energy. Same thing with capacity and resource adequacy. Well, now the region is, they're using, 20 megawatts is a small example, but if it was a bigger one, 100 megawatts more load or 1,000 megawatts more of load, well, the region is, doesn't have that available now in the winter and cold snap. And so has to contract out a market at a really high rate. Just wanted to give the commission a chance to review that and incorporate that into equitable cost sharing.
Mm-hmm. It's great.
I actually have a question about the next one that I know you're not making any changes. But I just want to make sure, maybe this is the Maria question. I think we structured the bill, or we should structure the bill to make sure that any data center is compliant with the res. Does this do that?
I think, well, I'm not certain. I'd have to confirm with Ellen, just to make sure the language is accurate. But this may have also been borrowed from, I'm going to say the 248 right here, but maybe that's not in it. No, I'd have to check. So let me just confirm, make sure that that's comprehensive enough.
Yeah, to me, that would be,
yeah.
To me, it's really important that that's worded correctly and that there's no loophole.
Okay.
For the record, that's important to us also. And we took that language to serve that goal, but if there's edits to make it more clear, we didn't touch it because we assumed that's what the intent was. And
well, I'm just realizing now I'm not sure we ever really took a deep dive on that.
So
language, I'm seeing like promote or not impede. So that feels a little squishy to me.
So right now, the way that this bill reads, I believe that it's being serviced by a utility and the utility is purchasing the power. And so this language says the location, this, that it will consider the utility, that this is not impeding utilities' ability to meet their requirements of the res.
So you're saying the data center is served by utility, it's the utility that's required to meet the res. So we want to make sure that a data center doesn't get in the way of that in any way.
That the commission will consider that.
Okay, so I want to make sure that's
Yeah, and I think it's a
totally
little
locked
bit,
in.
it's also, I think covered in that the other ratepayers shouldn't have to pay for costs of the renewability of a utility, on behalf of a data center, right? So if a data center comes, like whatever the contract price is, it's got to include whatever cost necessary to meet the renewable energy standard requirements for their load. And so whether that's and that would be for each tier even, right? Like they need to be as it is now, if it was under Green Mountain Power, right, 100% renewable by 2030. And if that's, done by existing hydro RECs, then the cost of those RECs need to be included in the large load service equity contract. So I think there is, it's kind of covered there, and then I think this language gets to it. But if there's more clear language, that we're open to that.
With that effect, any new contracts that these would enter into to secure power, because their contracts typically are long range contracts, right? Except for what they have to buy in the spot market, right? So this really addresses if they have to enter into new contracts for more power, right? Because of the data center, and those contracts are not for power that comes with RECs, and they have to buy RECs to cover them.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
I also think that the language above that we talked about would also cover the fact that, okay, so there's 1,000 megawatt data center, and that means we need 200 megawatts of new solar in Vermont, or new renewable energy in Vermont. Well, that could push up the cost of all new contracting for solar. I think that may be some of what you're getting at, right?
Right.
And so that not only the cost, but then the incremental cost that everybody has to pay should be considered by the commission in this contracting. So that's the goal. That's not in this provision. That's more in the one above, I guess on line 16 and 17. And you could even add the word renewable energy standard cost into 16 and 17 there, to be clear. We
Might not be
think that'd be appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it's not, then, okay.
Okay. So we're on to page 4. On page 4 here, we're still under all the requirements of a large load service equity contract. It shall. We deleted lines 1 through 6 because it now was duplicative of the lines above. And on line 7, for the duration of the contract, the original language had shall not be less than 10 years. And we removed the specificity of the years on that. And the reason that did that was because it really, the length of the contract could be shorter or longer, just as long as the protections, in particular the stranded cost provision that's later on, that was in the original, are accounted for. And so, there's a world where an 8-year contract, the data center pays for any of the transmission upgrades that it caused and any of the energy that was procured, and et cetera, and that still is beneficial. It just the specificity of the 10 years, so that's why we took it.
So I think I'm hearing you say that the stranded costs kind of cover. I'm worried about the evolving nature of this whole industry, that it could collapse, that, you know, it could get much more efficient, like all sorts of things could happen. And so don't want to see a community with something huge erected that's there for, 5 years and they go belly up and, so you're saying that will be addressed under the.
I think it's addressed in two ways. One with the stranded cost provision that is later on, and then two in the previous provisions where we're saying that data center needs to pay for all the infrastructure costs that are necessary, and they could set up the contract to pay for all of those in 8 years, and just have an 8-year contract, and everything is kind of paid for. It, in that way, I think it's possible to get the same protections in a year less or 2 years less.
So this allow for let's allow for any, there's no minimum.
Right.
So at some point, there's a business decision calculation that, you
Right.
have to build something.
Yes.
That's a lot of,
Right.
investment,
It's right. And the
right?
data center will want certainty also in
Right.
terms, and so I think that the market will it wouldn't be a 1-year contract. That's not going to be worth it for anybody. And so I think you would see some number of years, but I don't know what the right number is. And so having it having the contract, the guardrails on the contract to protect what we want to protect, I think kind of makes the specific number of years not as relevant.
But don't you need to have, so when you're thinking about the costs that will be incurred, don't you have to measure that in time?
Yes, but you could measure it over any number of time periods. Okay. So
that'll be up to the PUC to determine, we're gonna think about this being in place for 5 years or 25 years.
right, and the contract would be proposed, the tariff would be proposed, and it would be up to the PUC to consider, is the length of contract appropriate to recover all of the necessary costs from the data center. And
That makes sense to me.
Mhm.
Really?
Question.
Yeah.
I haven't read through the end of this, but can we talk about decommissioning funds anywhere?
There is a stranded cost, and I think there is a decommissioning requirement
It's later in the bill, I think.
later. in the bill. Yeah.
Thank you. As we're talking about,
Yeah.
they're going belly up in 5 years and leaving the community with a big metal building filled with a whole bunch of electronics
Mhm.
that need to be removed before you turn it into a paintball facility.
Okay.
Okay, so line 13, again, the data center will need to pay a minimum amount or percentage based on the data center's projected electricity usage for the duration of the contract. So this kind of gets to they're going to pay a minimum amount to cover costs, and then we just added to tie it back to section B1, which is ensuring that ratepayers are not on the hook.
Sorry. So I just want to note that I just reread, line 7, which says the contract has to specify the duration of the contract, which is where I was going to stop. Like, don't we have to specify that? It does say that. It's just, it's not.
Right, yes.
Sorry.
Okay, on we go.
Okay. All right, so lines 14 and 15 on page 4 here. This is the reasonable charge for demand in excess of the data center's projected electricity demand at the time of the contract, so that I think this was just modification of the language that was already here to get to what it thought was the intent of it, is that we're forecasting their usage going forward. If they use more, that the contract will account for that, and they're going to have to pay, a reasonable charge for that demand.
Okay,
Line 19 requires the contract to include provisions for implementation of demand side management operational measures, which would include load flexibility, as well as for the collection of gross receipts tax and any other fees or charges that are applicable on electricity. And so this is really intended to require efficiency and load management be a part of the contract. And we did not want to specify exactly what was to be done for energy efficiency and flexibility. Again, creative solutions could be out there. They could bring their own renewable generation plus storage. They could really implement the most cost-effective equipment, and all of that would be kind of addressed in consideration of approval of the large load contract. Later on in the bill, there was a whole section on demand side management. You'll see that is deleted for this more concise provision here that just calls for the utility to address it in the contract. So we're on to page 5 here. On line 6 here, we removed the new subdivision, or the original draft subdivision of siting, but it keeps some of the requirements of the commission. And so this gets to some of the conversation we had earlier with the land use review board here. It does continue to require that sorry, I accidentally edited in this Word document, I think, and it changed my lines, for instance, my notes.
Coffee.
Just make sure it's the same. I do have to bear with me. So that first section from line 6 to 11 just kind of clarifies the language. Commission shouldn't approve one of these contracts unless the commission finds that it promotes the general good of the state, and then has provisions underneath in line 12 to 13, really just changing the language to approve a large service equity contract, referencing, I think it's the right provision. And then on line 17, it removes the orderly development criteria.
So you've removed citing language from this, presuming it's in 250.
Correct. So
So you wouldn't have 250 and 248, or CPG. You wouldn't have 250 and a CPG.
right. So orderly development, and then later on it's aesthetics and natural resources, all removed from this language and the PUC's responsibility. And with the expectation that that would go under Act 250, notwithstanding what we talked about earlier about if there's a project under 10 acres that doesn't use a lot of water, doesn't trigger Act 250 review, that gap we talked about. Want to circle back to that gap at the end, that I think would probably be the most appropriate, if that makes sense. You can talk about it now if you want.
Just. So I understand that you're taking out all the Act 250 / citing considerations because that would not be department / PUC. It's not the part of the project you'd be doing. So I guess I'll just need to sit with our ledge council and get back to this like deep worry I have that this be done. So, and I know that's not, it's not a you question. It's just when I first read the bill, I was like, all right, this is good because we're, you know, everything is going to be looked at. So I'll just need to talk to, you know, our ledge council, I think, to make sure that we're not creating some massive loophole or. But I understand what I understand what you're doing here, which is that you are stripping out the language that would not be relevant to the parts of the project that PUC would be in charge of. Okay.
So that is on page 5, it's the orderly development criterion. On page 6, on line 4, that's the aesthetics, historic sites, air and water purity, natural environment criterion, use of natural resources. That originally, I believe, was modeled off of section 248. And so on line 12, it removes consistency with the it removes consistency with the distribution utilities integrated resource plan. In the load is really never and end users aren't really subject to the integrated resource plan. A special contract would could be considered relevant, but these are kind of one-offs that, you know, utility as they're planning. As I'm talking about this, I actually am not. I could see a reason to keep that provision in. So forgive me here, but I think we originally deleted it in thinking, okay, well, generation developers. That provision is waived in 248 proceedings for an integrated resource plan. Load, like a ski area, doesn't need to be consistent with the integrated resource plan. A utility needs to be consistent with the integrated resource plan. And so I think just by its nature, it's not something the commission needs to rule on in a large load tariff. If that were to be kept in, I don't think we would object.
Okay.
Well, your comment here says something about an extreme example being a bigger generation as it was cold. Well, somewhat less extreme. Same idea was gas. Right. And that's still not consistent with sort of general.
Would that be consistent with the integrated Well, so we're talking about the utilities integrated resource plan now, right? And so, utilities buy gas now in the spot market. I think the more, what's the word I'm looking for? The provisions that have more impact here are the renewable energy standard provisions,
Yeah.
the impact to other ratepayers.
Yeah,
You know, I think a natural gas generation there would hit, air quality, like permits and need that separate from this process.
that would be under A&R.
Yeah. And if it was electric generation, I mean, if it was like a natural gas plant, most likely you're going to be not necessarily, but most likely putting exporting to grid at some point as well. Go under
So then it would
the other
be-
Act 250 or Act
Section 248.
right 248.
Line 10 and 11. Community noise levels and greenhouse gas emissions reduction requirements. So with noise would be covered. Noise be covered under 250.
I think so.
Because I think that's
Yeah,
important.
confirm that.
And emissions reduction requirements. Why strike that?
That's not Act 250.
No.
Yeah, I
That's
agree. I think we should
250.
keep that. I think that could be one we keep.
Okay.
I think
And the noise.
I struck it all together. The noise, I think, well, that's subject to check. If Act 250 doesn't cover it, then it could be covered here, but
Yeah, I understand they're noisy.
Okay.
Where are the noise regs for wind? They're not in,
where are they?
yeah, they're not in 250, are they?
No, the PUC, enforces those anyway.
And Prime Ag, that's Act 250. I'm more looking over. I'm not,
Maria's not the active.
I know, I'm not
So-
expecting, TJ, I'm not expecting you to be our ledge counsel. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, you're not seeing my head.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm curious about Prime Ag, I'm curious about noise and the GWSA stuff we need
Well,
to keep in there.
10 VSA 6001 is Act 250.
Okay. So then it's really about noise
It's the noise and the emissions.
and the emissions. Cause
Yeah.
Act 250, that could have created next time. Oops. 'Cause- Okay,
Yeah, and just to be crystal clear, I agree with keeping the greenhouse gas emissions reduction requirement in here.
Yep.
And what about the next three lines that go through 14?
Well, the least cost integrated resource plan, I don't think that one is necessary. If we do have the next section or the next lines are the energy plan, and I think that my mind is more important, and that IRPs have to be consistent with the guidelines in the energy plan also. But if I think it's a hard. I think you could keep the IRPs if you were concerned about it, but I think it's covered by the energy plan. The same types of issues. It would just be better for later. Yeah. Sorry, doing some of this on the fly. I'll think about that more too, and have maybe a more clear answer for you. But I do appreciate the feedback on the red line. Greenhouse gas was a miss. Okay. Lines 18 and 19 are consistent with the long range transmission plan provided by Velco. That one's it's not really clear how those would tie together, the large load there. I mean, the plan just provide some forecasts of different scenarios of future load and here are the reliability deficiencies under those forecasts, and here's how we plan for those. So if this contract is consistent or not, with a long range transmission plan, it's a hard thing to grasp how that would work together.
Because these are issues you'd be considering as part of the contract,
Right.
as the core of the contract.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
On page 7 now. Lines 1 through 11 are the other citing criteria, and those are deleted. Just to point out that I know these are issues of import, so making sure that Act 250 covers them is important. But adverse effect on waters, the deleted can economically be served by existing or planned transmission, because that will be covered elsewhere in the contract. Believe the applicable air pollution control requirements.
That's not
That's not in Act 250, is it? So we,
50.
It'd be covered under an A&R.
it would be covered in an A&R permit. In theory, you could keep that here, and that then A&R would need to make, or the commission would need to make a finding that it is covered under that permit.
We might need to get A&Rs to do this.
Well, that was, we had a couple of, so Billy
Mhm.
was here.
Yeah, but have they seen this?
They have,
A&R has?
well, they saw it, yes, I sent it to them over the weekend, last weekend.
Okay, did we?
So they, I think that one thing that they highlighted is what we had talked about earlier, the potential gap. They were okay with the rest of it. I think that applicable air permits would have to be had anyway, and I think that's why we deleted it from here, but
Okay.
let's see, line 12 keeps it from the original version consistent with efficiency requirements. We don't necessarily have efficiency requirements per se, but I read that to be our broader efficiency framework. Yes.
Did you hear Director Walk's testimony earlier?
I did not, and I started to read the written, but I didn't get through it, so so what we've proposed here as it relates to efficiency is that the commission needs to approve a contract that ensures efficiency. It does not specify how that efficiency is done, so it provides some flexibility for creative solutions.
So I think he was hoping for the efficiency utility to be brought in
At the get-go.
at the get-go, no exemptions. And ongoing, maintenance
Right.
of the charge.
So, in my mind, I think there could be value in an opportunity for a broader look, and maybe that path is right, but I think Global Foundries IBM has operated pretty well under a different solution as it relates to efficiency. And so is there a solution that isn't through Efficiency Vermont? I don't know, but I think the PUC is probably best suited to kind of say it's efficiency, maybe it's Efficiency Vermont, maybe it's this other solution that is proposed. And so, I could imagine language in here that actually makes that explicit, that kind of choice, that the commission maybe it bulks up what we put in here that says that you have to account for efficiency, and it makes it more explicit, like we'll do will not be exempt from the efficiency charge unless it has another approved method that meets certain criteria. So I could see some path there that gives both options. But don't have language off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Okay, and then line 16 here, remove the, line 15 here deletes, adequately accounts for potential facility decommissioning. The reason that that was deleted is thinking that it was covered under no adequate, protections for ratepayers and not putting costs on ratepayers. And that along with the stranded cost provision. So that there'd be no stranded costs, costs caused by the facility that then are borne by ratepayers or others.
I think we should leave it in. I don't think I think it leaves too much to assumption.
I don't object to leaving it. And then the remainder of the page here removes rulemaking by the commission as not necessary under the construct of the large load service equity contract. So they wouldn't have to, no longer have to do any rulemaking.
So there wouldn't be a rulemaking process,
So it wouldn't be.
which I was seeing as another venue for public participation and legislative approval. So not so sure about that.
Well,
Oh, Maria? Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think that rulemaking under the original draft, it was the citing process. And so it had all of the criteria that the PUC would look at. It didn't have any of the procedure, like notice goes out when, hearings when, who can participate, all the procedural stuff was left for rulemaking, but now that that's being removed, I mean, that's why that was struck. It kind of, right? Because 248A and 248, they all have their procedures that are used by the PUC in coming up with a recommendation or deciding whether or not to approve a CPG. But this isn't now, under this construct, is not following that model. So it's just looking at the contract, making sure the contract includes all of these provisions and the criteria the PUC looks at to approve a contract, but there isn't a whole process for public participation or, right? So it's just a question of if you want to add any other process or.
Well, so if I'm understanding this right, so the
Citing.
PUC would be
Right.
developing a large load contract.
Mhm.
And how would that process be public or transparent?
Well, let me just clarify. I think the way it's constructed is what you're doing, the legislature is specifying at a minimum, these provisions need to be in the contract,
Mhm.
right? You have all of these things need to be met. Then the PUC either approves or disapproves the contract and list a number of things that the PUC weighs in making that determination. There isn't right now, I don't think, a public,
We could add that.
you could add a hearing, you could add
Workshop.
some, yeah, whatever you feel is appropriate for more public participation.
and I think there are, large load service equity contract tariff would be proposed to the commission, and it would go through kind of the traditional Public Utility Commission process. So
Which
parties-
is a public process.
right, which is a public process, which as you stated before, acknowledge that it can be challenging for individuals in particular to join, but it's also it is a public process with public hearings.
But this is really on rate, the impact to rates, that this is the public process that we're talking about for rates.
Right.
For citing, we are counting on the public process in Act 250 and contemplating whether or not we have a gap for citing. I think. So this public process here, what we would insert, if we would insert anything, would be specifically on
The structure of the contract, right? On how,
yeah, but it's not on the citing, which is,
yes.
Right, but still the structure of the contract seems really important
Yeah.
because that's where,
Yeah. I just wanted.
yeah, all the talk about like
Yes.
stranded costs and
Yes,
decommissioning, and that's
We may not-
super
yeah.
important
You
too.
know, we may not be thinking of everything here. Right?
Yeah,
I think Representative Sebelia is right. I think it is all about rates and it's stranded costs as it relates to the infrastructure developed to serve the load,
Mhm.
right? Transmission, distribution, infrastructure. It actually makes me think about decommissioning again and, facility decommissioning, like the building itself. It's not something that the commission really, it does energy project generation decommissioning, but the project itself, I'm not sure which bucket that lies in. If it's siting, decommissioning, or it's electric infrastructure, decommissioning.
this says,
Depends on where the costs are and who bears them. To the extent that they're the cost of ratepayers have to bear, then seems like a PUC issue, right?
Right, I would agree.
this says facility adequately, which you've asked to come back in. Is adequately accounts for potential facility decommission, but that's the building.
In which case that I'm gonna go back to where I originally was, I think, and say that the building should be in the Act 250 process, like the building itself. Not sure that is, it's just like,
So that,
the commission doesn't, say decommission a chairlift,
right,
right? Or a snowmaking guns that are new load on a ski resort. And so I'm not sure it's appropriate unless we are really specific in this PUC world that we're in this bill to, we could be specific to any adequately accounts for potential electric, infrastructure decommissioning. I think that makes sense.
so you're suggesting that decommissioning of the facility actually should be in the other world.
Yes.
Yeah, which I tend to agree with,
Yeah.
because
That could be
it's hard
an
to
A&R
imagine,
thing.
hard to imagine how the facility decommissioning would hit ratepayers. It's gonna be, someone abandons a building with a bunch of stuff in it. It's gonna land on the community, not the ratepayers, right?
Unless it was paid for by ratepayers, and then there's the hook to have it. So if it's houses the generator, I don't know, or houses some interconnection equipment.
And just say something about costs that have an impact on ratepayers, or say something like that. And also, could you lean back and flip the other light switch on or something? There we go.
oh my God, thank you.
Didn't we put a solar decommissioning clause in an earlier bill?
We didn't,
We did. It was there, but we took it out. We talked about it.
It was never put in.
it was never put in.
Sure. Okay.
I feel like electric generation projects often have a decommissioning plan approved and have to have a line of credit or
That's where I'm talking
yeah.
about. We never did that, huh?
I feel like it's already.
It's already in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so but you're saying this is different because it's a building and not a electrical generation.
Right. So I would say that, you know, for here, having some adequately accounts for electric infrastructure decommissioning would be appropriate for the PUC. But the facility, I mean, facility is not really well defined here, but we're thinking about it as just the building.
But I guess it seems to me that there might be other auxiliary impacts of large load that affected contracts that DUs entered into for a penny power that maybe now they don't need or something. I don't know. There seems like there are other possible impacts that are not necessarily physical, but might be contractual or something. Is that crazy to consider that?
No, I think that those are the ones that we're trying to address earlier on in the bill when we talked about the other impacts to.
Well, but I think now we're thinking about in terms of stranded or, stranded costs because of a facility that was anticipating operating is now no longer operating. So, and now there's nobody to pay for it, but pay those costs because the entity is out of business.
Right. So stranded costs are addressed earlier, different than decommissioning. So I'm struggling with the, so it sounds like what you're talking about is stranded costs, which I think are included.
Okay, so we think that's covered elsewhere.
Yeah, right.
Would the building itself be considered a stranded cost at that point?
Interesting.
That's kind of what I'm wondering, because where do you get to the loss of property tax revenues and stuff?
Yeah, right. Well, public good.
Rep Allen?
Well, I was,
Fine,
when
public
you
good.
talking about, property taxes, how many municipalities still have a personal property tax on the inventory or the value of the equipment inside a facility? But I mean, if you just have a bunch of chips in there that are no longer drawing electricity and so forth, the worst fact is that they may be hazardous in some ways.
That's a site cleanup issue, right?
Pardon?
That's a site cleanup issue.
Well, isn't that what we're talking about, decommissioning here and the whole site cleanup?
We're trying to separate this site issues from electric rate impacts. Something else.
Right.
If it's only in the jurisdiction of municipal zoning, does zoning have any bearing on that?
There's no way. There's no way that we can have this just be under.
Is it covered in Act 250?
Well, that's the question. So, I mean, and, Billy said he reviewed, Billy Coster from A&R, who's the Act 250 guy, said he reviewed this. So, but I don't think we specifically asked him about decommission.
Yeah, this should be.
Yeah, agreed.
Sure.
So I had a meeting. We're running a little late.
So I can go through, well, I can at least go through the rest of the quick changes quickly. I don't know if,
Okay, if we could, and then I think we get to come back.
You saw it?
I only have
This
two
was
good
helpful.
students here. Okay, so on page 8, this removes the original demand side management section in favor of what we talked about earlier. And so I won't go into detail on that, but it's since we already did. On page 9, it gets into quarterly and annual reporting. On line 15, we remove the data center requirement to provide a description of interconnection requests in other states. You know, I'm not sure how much value that provides, and just thinking about other large businesses, you know, we don't ask Vail Enterprises. I keep going to ski resorts because they're a large load, but tell us if they're, you know, thinking about buying another mountain in another state or
I think this potentially has value just because we know that they're getting into a bunch of queues,
right. So
but that's
yeah,
before, not after. So, right? Right?
That's what it.
correct. We did add some language for them to report on info related to the shared infrastructure that was constructed to support the data center. I thought that could be useful. On line 19 for public service department reports, we modified the language a little bit so that we would just include it as part of our annual energy report. And then only have it be if a data center locates here. But we'll also then report on developments in the region on like what's happening. So you get some of that from just our experience in talking with our counterparts in other states and what's really going on elsewhere.
The region means ISO.
Yes, that's what, yes, that's
Okay.
how I use that term, but we, you know, it could be outside of ISO if it's ISO New England if it's relevant, honestly. And then section page 10, we removed the section on creating a new financing structure from data centers. Since we felt like the renewable energy standard, gross receipts tax, and efficiency are addressed elsewhere as part of the approval of the contract, that kind of legislatively saying you're taking a certain amount of this money for a kind of to be determined fund. We didn't think that was appropriate this time. And that's it. You know, I'll just close and say we think we will really appreciate this approach and like this a lot better than a potential moratorium where we can set guidance and say yes if and yes if it is good for the state, and really appreciate this approach and appreciate you all letting us give you feedback on it.
TJ, I'm just looking at the agenda. So you're coming at 2:00 and we have like an hour and 15 minutes tomorrow. So why don't we
Get you
Let's-
another mug.
set aside a little bit of that time to finish any questions about your suggestions on the data center bill? Is
Okay.
that okay? And Alex, you can just update the agenda to show that TJ is going to be talking about both of those things.
Are there specifics you want me to address? I think I kind
I
of
don't know,
covered our
just-
thinking, but if there's,
Maybe.
okay.
I don't know. I just want to put it on the agenda so that we can return to this if folks have questions.
Perfect.
And then, Alex, our 9:00 vote Thursday morning on the committee bill, you can take that off the agenda. That is no longer ready for prime time. Okay, let's go off live and thank you so much. All righty.